people. Boy, do I need a 1-hour session. Let me know when I could enter that realm. God, you guys could dissect a lot for me. But
you were really good on this podcast. You didn't say moron, imbecile, or idiot once.
I have never called you a name. I have never.
Not me.
We don't. Well, I will when I take calls in about 5 minutes. Trust me.
I know you will.
You know this man as one of the best poker players in the world. At least I do. He's been that for the last few decades, and it's been a little while since he did the show. He's also been retweeted by Elon Musk, so I definitely have to talk to him about that. It might be a little different of an interview than what he's accustomed to, but always appreciate it when Real Kid Poker Daniel Negreanu joins us on the show. Daniel, it is good to see you, my friend. It's been a little while.
Good to see you. It has been a little while. Hope all is well.
Yeah, things are going well, my friend. How are things going with you? What have you been up to lately besides playing poker?
Well, actually, we've been doing a little of that. And my wife and I, we started our own little podcast called Mania, which has been fun. We released it every Tuesday on my YouTube channel. And that's sort of been fun. We cover the gamut. It's not a political podcast, right? So if that's what you're looking for, that's not it. But we have a lot of fun with it, and it's really good for the relationship. And so that's what we've been mainly doing.
Very cool. There's a lot of people in this country that struggle with mental illness. There's no question about that. And it's not a laughing matter. So I certainly applaud you for doing that. And you're helping a lot of people in that process. I think that's great. I wanted to ask you this. Were you surprised when you were retweeted by Elon Musk? And if you could give people a little bit of background on what that tweet was all about and why you think he retweeted it.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I know people in his circle. We've never met. I never met the man. He did like one of my tweets before, or replied to it. So this one tweet that I posted, I don't remember which one it was specifically, but it went quite viral. Probably when he retweets you, you get a lot of virality. And essentially, it was kind of a discussion post-election about some of the things that went wrong for the Democratic Party, where I believe that they made missteps, areas they can improve. And, and I obviously he likely agreed with much of it, because one of the things that I mentioned was, when Biden had a summit on electric vehicles, right? You want to get all the best, brightest minds on that and, figure it out. And he wasn't invited. And I was like, well, that seems kind of like back then. This was before, the sort of, the view on Elon being what it is today by many people. It just seemed like a misstep to not invite him. And I think he's a very sensitive, he's autistic, right? Very clearly. I think he's also quite sensitive. I think he wanted, when he first started with electric vehicles and climate change, he wanted to be beloved by the left, right? And that didn't happen. So I think he just put both fingers up and kind of like a child, if you will, an autistic child, was like, F you, then screw you. And, now he's predominantly hated by most on the left.
So speaking of hated, you're from Canada, and I think hate is a strong word here, and maybe it's the wrong word. But, you're a hockey fan, and you see in some of these hockey arenas at these games, they're booing the Star-Spangled Banner. I've never seen that before in my lifetime. I don't think you have either. What do you make of that? If someone that has lived in this country for a long time now, you're from Canada, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I did tweet about that too, because I have a pretty strong opinion about international sporting events, right? I don't care if it was North Korea's national anthem. I don't care if it was Russia's. I would never condone booing it in this environment. That's not what that's for. I do fully understand why the people of Canada were upset. I do understand why they thought this was their opportunity. But then I asked myself, I was like, what difference did you really make? What positive influence did you really have? You didn't do anything. And there was a funny skit that a Canadian company did. What if the singer was somebody like a Make-A-Wish singer, who's in a wheelchair and comes out to sing the song? Are you still going to boo? I mean, because you're booing the singer, you're booing the players on the ice. I get that you are booing, Trump and his boisterous comments about annexing Canada and all that silliness. And I get that. I just would have never done it in that appropriate, in that environment. But I will say this, it made the hockey amazing, so he did one thing, maybe not make it great. He make hockey great again. He certainly did that.
Well, but in all seriousness, Daniel, can you understand, though, there are a lot of people in Canada that are very upset at Donald Trump. Maybe they're not upset at, it doesn't appear like they're upset at people like me and you, Americans. They're upset at the Trump administration for these 25% tariffs, these threats, and the things he said about Canada, the 51st state. So, can you kind of understand? I'm not saying I condone booing during the Star-Spangled Banner, but can you understand where they're coming from?
Oh yeah, as I said, I get it. No, there's two sort of different facets. Him talking about taking over Canada, annexing, that's just ridiculous. That is so absurd. However, the tariff thing, this is business, right? So one of the tweets that he did put out was, here's the deal. Because there's tariffs that Canada puts on our beef, on our eggs, and all those types of things. He says, listen, whatever you charge us, we will charge you. If you charge us zero, we will charge you zero. We'll match whatever you want to do. And, in that regard, that felt like an olive branch of fairness in that regard. And I get that tariffs, typically, most economists will say tariffs are not an effective way to do business, but they are a tool that you can use to sort of manipulate things like that. And I think Trump has a very frail ego, as we know, right? I think this all stemmed from years ago in his first term when Macron and Trudeau and Merkel were caught on camera, and Trudeau was sort of making fun of him, mocking him. And Trump doesn't forget stuff like this. So this was his opportunity to, for lack of a better term, make him his little bitch, if you will, and be like, you're my little governor guy, right? And I do think it was a lot of it has to do with vengefulness that clouds the reality of how silly it is to even mention annexing Canada.
Right. So, Daniel, I don't disagree with you. I think that's very plausible. But don't you think it's dangerous to have a president of the United States that has that fragile of an ego, that he would look at something like that from years ago and implement 25% tariffs because of that, and the American consumer are the ones that are going to be suffering for it? Don't you find that to be a little bit dangerous?
Well, I don't know if I would use the word specifically dangerous. I would say it's like, it could be potentially problematic, right? I think one of the things you see with him is there's a lot of bluster. There's a lot of he says a lot of things. A lot of them are nonsensical. A lot of them are silly and stupid. But ultimately, I think, what you learn to do with this guy over a decade is to go, okay, let's look at what he's doing, and the actions that he's taking. And if he does go forward with any sort of, aggressive plan to annex Canada, then I would be really, really worried. At this point, it feels to me like blusterous BS, negotiation tactics.
Okay. So yes, there's a lot of that going on. I also agree with you. Like when he says he's going to end the war in 24 hours, but let's talk about that because I know you have some opinions on that. It appears to me that he has been coddling Vladimir Putin since day one. He calls Zelensky a dictator. He says Ukraine started it. Both of those things are not true. And I mean, to me, he fails to call out Putin for anything. That phone call, according to the Kremlin, went great, and the two transcripts are very different. What do you make of this situation? And it doesn't appear to me that Donald Trump has gotten them any closer.
Yeah, well, one thing you can say about Donald Trump is he said a lot of mean, nasty things about a lot of different people. Never once has he ever made a comment about Vladimir Putin that was negative, right? And you can look at that strategically in two ways. One, are we cozying up to our enemies, if you will? Or number two, is this keep your enemies close, your friends close and your enemies closer, right? Like I sort of had my view shifted a little bit on is it good or bad for us to have a peaceful relationship with Russia where Putin feels like he's manipulating Trump, right? Which is very likely the case. If that keeps us out of wars, or that can lead to potential peace talks with Ukraine, is that overall a good or a bad? I don't know the correct answer to that. I will say though that I have friends in Ukraine right now, and they were really shocked by what happened in the Oval Office from both sides. Frankly, they couldn't believe, and Zelensky supporters were surprised that he went there, right? And Fareed Zakaria said something so clearly. It's like, how have you not learned up to this point how to deal with Trump? You bring him this peace prize, okay? And you say, Mr. Trump, thank you for all your help in Ukraine. This is the award that nobody gets, right? You come in there, you wear a suit, whatever the case may be, because you're coming there asking for a favor. And they were surprised at sort of the attitude that he took on both sides. Obviously, I'm not surprised at Trump. J.D. Vance was a little surprising because I think he instigated the brouhaha. And I don't know if it was by design. It felt a little bit like good cop, bad cop that turned into bad cop everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Daniel, I'm extremely anti-Donald Trump. That's not a surprise to you and many others. I look at the first 8 weeks of this administration, and I don't want to live in a country where people are being deported in schools and churches and synagogues. Many of these people are non-violent criminals. I think, like you and many others, we want violent criminals out of the country that don't have the proper paperwork. I don't have a problem with that. I look at the pardons of the January 6th insurrectionists, many of whom were violent criminals who beat police officers. And this is my problem with the argument on the Tesla stuff, right? You don't condone the violence. I don't condone the violence. I haven't seen one top Democrat condone blowing up Tesla vehicles. We all don't do that. But Donald Trump comes out and calls them domestic terrorists. And many on the far right call them domestic terrorists. And I think to myself, okay, how can you be a domestic terrorist if you blow up a vehicle, which I don't condone, but then if you beat police officers on January 6th, somehow that makes you a patriot? Help me understand that, because I don't understand that at all.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic that you bring up, right? Because in both cases, you could argue that the domestic terrorist acts, right? Obviously, January. So the thing is, you sort of said that no Democrats are condoning it, but they're also not really speaking out against it. Like we saw Tim Walz just recently, do a thing where he's bragging about Tesla stock going down and like
Right.
that he takes glee from that. Meanwhile, his own state of Minnesota, their retirement fund has $1.6 million in Tesla stock. Tesla, for all its warts and whatever, with Elon being at the top of it, it is one of the most innovative American companies with thousands of people employed that are creating electric self-driving cars, robotics, sustainable energy sources, like a whole bunch of big problems that can be solved, right? So I think if you look at both sides, like you said, I agree with you that those that were quiet on January 6th about that have no right to speak out against this. But the truth is also in reverse, right? Many on the left were condemning January 6th as an attack, which I agree was absolutely so. But I don't hear AOC saying we need to stop people vandalizing people's property and things like that. So I think it's a thing you can look at both sides. And this is politics, right? When it's your team, you're like, rah, rah, rah. And when it's not, you're like, shh, don't say nothing. This is bad for us.
Sure. I mean, every commentator I've heard, I watch the news pretty closely, whether it be MSNBC or a CNN panel, when they're asked that question, they all say the same thing. We shouldn't condone any violence and this is inappropriate and it shouldn't happen. But if you're the president of the United States and you want to call these people domestic terrorists, don't pardon a bunch of people who beat cops on January 6th. And I think that's a very fair argument to have in my personal opinion. So I look at, Daniel, all the people that are losing jobs, who have government jobs, some of whom are veterans, some of whom are rangers and forests and all sorts of different jobs across the country. I look at egg prices. I believe they're up somewhere around $3 since day one. Donald Trump said he would lower the prices on day one.
They're way back down. But
right. Well, they are. You're right. They're way back down from a few weeks ago, but they're not down from day one when Donald Trump took office. I think there's a difference there. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is I don't blame Donald Trump for the price of eggs. Bird flu, there's a lot of factors involved, right? But for 4 years, I heard MAGA Republicans complaining about inflation and gas prices, and they didn't want to talk about the war in Ukraine. They didn't want to talk about coming out of a global pandemic. There's cause and effect for everything. And I'm not saying the president doesn't have some say in policy, but at the same time, many MAGA Republicans don't want Democrats to complain about the price of eggs. Don't blame Donald Trump for that. You blamed everything on Joe Biden for 4 years and didn't talk about cause and effect. I just think it's hypocrites. That's all.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It is hypocritical. And it's like, here's the thing. Egg prices have nothing to do with Joe Biden or Donald Trump. They have to do with like slaughtering a bunch of chickens and all that. And I think it's something that people latch onto in the tribalistic world that we live in, right? It's almost like, and this is a sad reality, is if you hate Donald Trump, I'm not saying you would have this position, like you want the price of eggs to go up so you get to be right? You actually don't want what's best for America. And I hope we get to a place where this is the facts, right? The next 4 years, this is the administration, right? You have a choice. Do you want them to succeed or do you want them to fail so that, you can be in power, the next time? I would hope that most Americans would, even if they disagree vehemently with some of the things that are being done, hope that the country succeeds because we all benefit from that. And I feel as though when you read some of the rhetoric and, Tim Walz rooting for the Tesla stock, that was despicable. As far as I was really ashamed that he did that. I couldn't believe it. I was really surprised. Like, of all the things you could accuse, with all the things you could slam Elon and all that for, like it just seemed in poor taste. And I get it when, we have to call it out on both sides. And I thought that was in poor taste.
It was a little context though. It was before those cars were blown up in Las Vegas. So he didn't, if he did it right after that, I probably would agree with you. Fair. It was before. What's my opinion on that? Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Daniel. I'm not rooting for Elon Musk to succeed. I'm rooting for him to fail. Now, I'm not rooting for the country to fail. I'm not rooting for Donald Trump to fail. But I am rooting for Elon Musk's companies to fail. Why do I say that? Because I don't believe Elon Musk is in this for you and me. I don't believe Elon Musk woke up one day and said, you know what, God, there's so much government wasteful spending. I'm going to do everything I can. No, I don't think so. I think he's in it for retribution for the people that have done him wrong. I think he's in it for his own investors. I think he's in it for himself. I think he's a terrible father, and I don't think he's a good human being. And no matter what, social anxieties he has, to me, that's irrelevant and it's academic. I believe he donated $300 to $400 million to Donald Trump so that Donald Trump could win. And now Elon Musk has literally made billions and billions and billions of dollars because he's in the position he's in. Now you can make the argument, wait, his stocks are down, his companies are failing a little bit. He's still going to be making money over the course of the next 3.5 years. So, that's just my personal opinion. And while he's cutting these jobs, and he's talked about an entitlement when it comes to Medicare, which is absurd. He's the richest man in the world, and he wants to take, Social Security and Medicare away. In an interview, he alluded to that a few weeks ago. I'm not rooting for him to succeed. Tell me why you think I'm wrong.
Well, listen, I don't think you're wrong because it's your opinion, right? And one of the great things about America is we all get to have opinions about motivation, right? Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. You and I, we don't really know the guy, right? I do know some people who know him and they speak to his motivation. So I have a different view of like his motivation. I mean, I don't think it's financial, like based on, what I've heard from friends and stuff. He's, he was always sort of like a big thinker with, the rocket ships and the electric cars and the robots and the AI and all these types of things. So I do think there's a sense of him wanting to be liked for sure. And the frustration of feeling like he isn't because of the, a lot of the positive contributions he's made for society, right? Like if he can create sustainable energy with those, Tesla builds and homes and things like that, I take a very different view. I think Tesla is an American company that is the most innovative we've had in a long time. And I want them to succeed because it's good for America, I think, right? And it's unfortunate to me that he has done a poor job from a PR perspective and everything else of creating this divide because he's, very quick to anger and he's tweeting far too much. He's getting involved in too much of the tribalism. If he just stayed out of it for the most part, I don't think people would have this negative sort of view of Tesla, because really, if you took Elon out of Tesla, right? And you look at that company on its own, what an amazing company that is,
So I tend to agree with some of what you said. If he wasn't in Doge and if they weren't claiming all this fraud and doing the things that they were doing, then maybe I would have a different opinion. Doesn't mean I would like him, but I wouldn't necessarily root against his companies. And I agree with some of what you said. My problem with Elon Musk is, number one, I don't think he's a good person. I don't think he's a good father. I believe he uses some of his infant kids as props. And I think it's inappropriate for him to be holding press conferences in the Oval Office with his 2-year-old there. And he's an unelected official. And what's going on throughout the country and so many Americans that are suffering because of things that he is implementing. That's why I don't like him. And I think that's why he's hated by a lot of people, not just, quite frankly, in this country, but around the world.
Yeah, frankly, even more so in other countries. Like I think Tesla, you won't see one in Germany. they call it the swastika car there now. Right. I think it's unfortunate, the fall from grace that he's had, because I think he has a lot of potential, more so to, have a positive impact on the world than pretty much anyone else, but he doesn't always do that. Yeah. As far as, his involvement with Doge and those types of things, like he's kind of, everything he's ever done has sort of been a fixer type, right? Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, when you are this sort of mindset, sometimes you lose the human compassion element of like, we're going to cut this because we don't need it. I'm like, yeah, but hold on. Right. Maybe don't do that just yet, because there's 20,000 people who are going to be out of a job for a minute, and maybe you need them back. So I think there's maybe a little bit of a rashness and a quickness to sort of, instead of just go, before we cut something, let's make sure we need it, rather than cut everything and then go, oh, well, you know what? Let's have you guys come back.
Completely agree with what you just said. And maybe the president shouldn't be saying they've saved hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud, and yet they haven't named one person that's committed the fraud. I think that's also important too.
I don't like that they use the word fraud, because you can use the word waste, because I think every American, regardless of your political views, we all agree that America has some wasteful,
Sure.
So, you're focusing on the waste and say, like, why are we spending this much money on this? And like,
fraud is against the law. Fraud is a crime in this country.
Right,
and if it is a crime, then you have to defer some names to.
Now, I will say this. There is likely, and listen, this is government. There is likely a lot of these sort of investments we make. Like, you look at how politicians who make $180,000 a year all of a sudden have 30 million. You go, can you show me your receipts, how you got here? And sometimes I would imagine, and I'm not saying that they found any, I would make a reasonable assumption that there is some fraud and corruption among politicians, because we don't trust politicians. Yeah.
Listen, if anyone who denied that is complicit, I agree with you on that 150%. But I think one of the guys that probably has a lot of that going on right now is Donald Trump and certain members of his administration. Last Elon Musk question, and it's more of a statement, and I want to get your thoughts on this, because this is what I'm talking about. I remember when the Heil Hitler thing, was, some people said he did it, some people said he didn't do it. Regardless of what you think, the same week of that controversy, he decided to speak in front of an alt-right German group. Many of people in that group are Holocaust deniers. So if you're trying to make the case that you're not anti-Semitic, and you're trying to make the case that this is outrageous, I wasn't saluting, it wasn't a Nazi salute, then why would you talk to a group of people, some of whom are literally neo-Nazis, in the same week of that controversy?
Okay, so important on that, right? Let's look at who leads that party. And it is a lesbian woman married to a Sri Lankan woman. Okay.
Mhm.
Typically not your Nazi head figures, right? Now,
Mhm.
within that party, you're absolutely right. Nazis are going to be drawn to that, much like, white supremacist Nazis are going to be drawn to Trump. That isn't indicative necessarily of the group itself. So when it's, to be labeled as though the party itself is, alt-right and all that stuff, I don't know that that's a fair, fair analogy, because they want a more reasonable immigration plan, which I think a lot of Germans agree with. But you're right in that if you are a white supremacist and a Nazi, you are going to be within that party. I mean, Elon clearly believes, and I do too, frankly, that Europe is in big danger. Okay. I think Europe is facing an existential crisis beyond what we can ever imagine, with massive immigration, overwhelming numbers of people that their values are not aligned with certainly Western values or whatever. And it's a dangerous precedent that's being said. So I actually would agree with that notion. I think a lot of people in Europe are starting to see that, whether it's Ireland, the UK, Germany, France. So, I mean, in his eye, he's like, which party is going to address that issue? He goes with them. And then you're right. There are some within that party who have those beliefs. But that doesn't necessarily mean the head of the party, which is a lesbian married to a Sri Lankan woman.
Oh no, I'm not saying she is.
Yeah,
correct.
Right.
Correct. I'm not saying she is. Just some of the people that are in that group. I don't even know the answer to this question. Have you gone publicly and told anybody who you voted for? Like, have you said anything publicly about that? Whether you voted?
No,
for
I consider myself a homeless independent. A politically homeless independend who sees flaws in both sides and really wants both parties to succeed. I want both parties to learn from their mistakes. I really would like to see Jared Polis, Josh Shapiro, Gavin Newsom start to understand what are the mistakes we made? Why are we losing so much? And I wanted to say this real quickly. I feel like whenever a party's in power, a level of arrogance is built into we can get away with whatever we want. And I think to some degree, the Democratic Party, we push so heavily against 80-20 issues where majority of Americans, even Democrats, agree with, and we're sort of taking a little too far, and I think you see Gavin, you see some of these others starting to, wake up to that. I mean, if the election was a bit of a mandate, every single battleground state, and he won the popular vote, that's insane. I would have bet a lot of money that wouldn't be possible. That
you think that's a mandate though, Daniel? Sorry to interrupt. You think that's a mandate? Sense,
because I think when you think of what was expected, right? A Republican president, if you looked at the lines of winning the popular vote, is non-existent. You can't even get a price. It's so astronomical. For him to do that and also win, the battleground states, and you see a migration of various different groups starting to vote for him, I think a lot of people got fed up. Frankly, the one ad, as silly as it is, that he had, which was she's for they, them, and, he's for you. They spent so much money on that because it was affected, not because the majority of people are transphobic or anti-gay. It was because they're, it's a battle of crazy. And they're like, well, this guy's crazy. We know Trump's crazy. And you're losing a battle of crazy to a crazy guy. Show us that you're sane. Show us that you're reasonable. And so I think I think that hopefully is the path forward for the Democrats, like the John Fettermans of the world, who, he has a brand of his own. He wears sweats. He's like a regular guy. He speaks regularly. He has his own opinions. I'd love for politicians to get to that point where, even 67% of Democrats believe that, biological males should not be in female sports, right? Not, that's a big number, right? Yet not one single Democratic senator voted along those lines to sort of, impart a new bill.
That was a mistake. That was a mistake. I was asked that on the Pierce Morgan show a few weeks ago, and I gave him an honest answer. I said, no, I think if you're born a man, transition to a woman, you should not, be competing on the field. But I also said, it's not really a top 5 or a top 10 issue. And I think there are 14 Division I trans athletes in Division I sports. What I care more about is healthcare. What I care, and by the way, Donald Trump still doesn't have a replacement plan. He still has concepts of a plan. Gun control, maternity leave. I want women to have the right to choose what they do with their own bodies. And if the MAGA Republicans want to keep talking about transgenders, Matt Walsh and Candace Owens, these are people that make a living, and I think they're bigots. With that being said, you're right. Democrats should just come on, man.
Well, I mean, when you man, the big story that came out was Leah Thomas, right? Who was destroying women's swimming. And here's the issue, for this person to be allowed. This person still has a penis, okay? Was in the locker room naked, swimming against other women, and we're trying to rationalize that and say that there's something okay about this. And it's like, it's what it shows. It's, again, you're right. It's not a top 5 issue, but it's so obvious to most people, like how this is. So there's something not fair about this. And Gavin Newsom on his podcast recently said so, and he was lambasted by the people on the far left. He got shelled for saying that, like,
hold on, Daniel. Here's why I criticized. Let's talk about this. Here's why I criticized Gavin Newsom. And by the way, I agree with Gavin Newsom on what he said about this issue. Here's why I've been criticizing him, not for interviewing Charlie Kirk, not for interviewing Steve Bannon. Gosh, I had Enrique Tarrio on the show last week. I don't mind if people interview, controversial figures, but he didn't push back at all. And Gavin Newsom's an intelligent guy. We could agree on that. He's capable of debating anybody. Charlie Kirk is, in my opinion, is a white supremacist sympathizer. I mean, Steve Bannon is an atrocious human being. He didn't push back on these guys at all. And I was very disappointed in him. That's why I've been criticizing him.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I didn't actually listen to the podcasts. I saw a few of the clips and whatnot. And I do like the idea that he's doing that. And I think maybe, again, I can't speak to whether or not he pushed back enough, but I do think it's a really good idea to have these discussions. This is something Bill Maher has been doing for many years, having people from both sides and trying to have some common sense, because I really hope, I genuinely do hope that we heal the divide. I don't want to see rhetoric, I want everyone to be like we used to, which was when Reagan was in office many, many years ago, whether you're Republican or Democrat, people rooted for America, man. And I'd love for that to be the case again. And again, I don't know that that's going to happen in the next 4 years, but I hope going forward, there are more common sense people that say, listen, let's speak to the middle. Let's speak to the common sense people in America. Let's not cater to any fringes, right? And let's do what's right for the country.
Daniel, I'm with you. I think it's impossible, and I'll put the right and the left in there. I think it's impossible for that to happen when Donald Trump is hijacked the Republican Party. And listen, the Rashida Tlaibs of the world and people like maybe the Ilhan Omars, I think they need to, I don't want them in office either. But Donald Trump is the leader of the free world, and he's also hijacked the Republican Party. With Donald Trump at the realm, who literally has nicknames for people that he disagrees with, I just don't see that happening. All right, if you're just joining us, he is Danny Negreanu. We've done the first 20 minutes or so just talking about politics. I have to ask you a few poker questions before I let you go. Let's have some fun here for a little bit. Life is short. What is your biggest criticism of the poker brat, Phil Hellmuth?
My biggest criticism of Phil Hellmuth is his unwillingness to acknowledge that the younger generation who works really hard is better than he is at a game that he doesn't work on anymore.
Interesting answer. I thought maybe you'd talk about his crying after losing hands.
Oh, that's great. I love it. Let him go. I think that's fun. I love that he's a character. I love that he's emotional. I love that he cares so much about winning. What I wish he would do is stop living in this fantasy land. You're 60 years old now. Okay. There are guys that are 25, 30 years old that are spending 12 hours a day studying the game at a very, very high level. You never play against them. You won't go over to Triton and play, but you just say that you're better than them without showing any evidence to back up your claim, right? And that's where I take issue. I don't think I'm the greatest poker player in the world. I don't. I know I'm among them, right? But I'm 50 now. I don't spend the time and I don't have the energy to do what a lot of these young guys do, but I have deep admiration for what they do and a healthy respect for it. Having said that, I'll jump in the ring with them and give it a shot, but I'm not going to sit there and beat my chest and say, I'm still the greatest.
Do you think he does it because it's all genuine, or do you think there's a part of Phil Hellmuth that acts the way he acts because he's promoting himself and he has that aura about him and he's made a lot of money calling himself the poker brat? Do you think it's a little bit of both? What do you think?
Oddly enough, the comparison to Donald Trump, there are some there, right? First of all, well, I do think Phil has a very good heart. He's a good person, but he's got an insecurity about him, and he's acknowledged this, which leads to an arrogance and leads to a boastfulness and leads to an absolute need to be viewed and seen in a positive light, or seen as the best. Like I said to him, I was having a phone call with him and I was like, why do you need to toot your own horn? He says, if I don't toot my horn, other people won't. And I'm like, you let your peers do it. You look at Eric Seidel, who's a similar age, and people have nothing but positive things to say about him. They revere him. And the big reason for that is because the way he handles himself. He's not out there boasting about how great he is. When you do that, you are the one that put the target on your back. You are the reason why people discredit you, because you've set yourself up on this pedestal without any humility.
I think that's a good answer. What do you hate most at the poker table that an amateur will do, or even a professional? Something that is one of your pet peeves that you wish would change. What is it at the poker table that somebody will do that bothers you the most today?
Well, something that people would actually do is berate someone who just beat them a pot, or the dealers. Like, you see that a lot. Frankly, it's a California thing, by the way. It's very prevalent in California where you lose a pot. It's like a cultural thing. And it's funny because you watch how cultures sort of emerge, and it's like a known thing. You lose a pot, you whip your cards to the dealer. You look at the dealer like you want to fight the dealer. You blame the dealer who only dealt the cards. You made all the decisions. You know what I mean? But they have this need to sort of look outside themselves and blame the dealer. I also don't like when people blame another player for a play they made. Maybe this guy's just a businessman, recreation. He wanted to have some fun, so he played a 9 and a 3 because he felt like it. He beat your aces. Instead of berating him and telling him how stupid he is, that doesn't do you any good, right? That's a character flaw, and it's bad for the game because, you need people like that. You want people like that at the table because he's not going to win doing that. And isn't that good for you in the end?
That's a good point. I need to work on that. By the way, talking about berating the dealers, I think Stu Unger, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, was known for that back in the day, right?
He peed on a dealer for real. Like, he literally peed on a dealer. That actually happened many, many years ago. Yeah.
Oh my God, that is absolutely horrible.
I will say this. I've noticed that the last 10, 15 years, people are much better about it. You see it far less often. It was more of like an older school kind of superstitious thing, where, and it was also sometimes, you know what? It was almost like a oddly, okay. So many of my Vietnamese friends were racist against Vietnamese female dealers. Okay. If they would be like, I never win with you in the box. Bring me somebody else. I'm like, okay, I don't know. Can you be racist against your own kind in this regard? Because it's what it felt like.
Oh my God, that's awful. I guess that leads
my Vietnamese friends would tell me I'm so unlucky with Vietnamese girl dealers.
Oh my God, that is terrible. It sounds like somebody that might be unlucky with women to begin with, but that could be another story for another show. Yeah. What is the worst thing? You've been doing this for a long time at the highest level. What is the worst thing you've ever seen at the poker table in a game that you've played? It could be a private cash game, a tournament. What's the worst thing you've ever had to deal with or seen at the table?
That's a really tough question. I'm really bad with sort of recollecting stories like that and on the spot. I'd have to dig. I can't think of anything specific.
Did you ever catch somebody cheating in a big game, like a big cash game or a tournament where you knew somebody
I think that's more of like, that's something that you see happen more often in private games and stuff. And I don't go into that world really.
You've never played like big cash games with some big time celebrities? That surprises me a little bit.
10 years ago, I once played at Tobey Maguire's house, and Leonardo DiCaprio was there, as well as Jack Black and a few others. And I played in a game. There was a night actually that Spider-Man was surpassing Titanic in the box office. And every 30 minutes or so, Toby would get a call. And like, you could see that Leonardo DiCaprio was not happy about it. Like, he was annoyed. And then Leo lost the pot. I remember he lost the pot, which had like $4,000 in it. And he wasn't happy about it. And he went outside and he broke a bottle. And I'm like, well, yeah, now you're only worth like 997,600,000. You know what I mean?
Wait, hold on a second. So this is the day that Spider-Man opened, you're saying, and you're at
it opened at the box office, and they were looking at the initial numbers.
And you're at Tobey Maguire's house in a poker cash game. If you mind me, what was it, like 10, 20, 20? Like what?
I don't even remember the stakes actually, but I think it might have been
something like that. And Leonardo and DiCaprio's at the table. Jack Black is at the table, which sounds pretty awesome. And you're saying DiCaprio loses a $3,000 or $4,000 pot, and he goes outside and he breaks a bottle.
I mean, I kind of love it. I kind of respect it. It's like not about the money. It's about the competition. He wants to win, you know? It's very difficult, I think, for people when you have a bankroll, like a lot of money, like to care about stuff like that. But I think it's cool. I actually like that he was emotional about it.
Okay, so I heard a rumor, because of who you are, you get to play golf with some very famous people. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard a rumor that you had an invite to play golf with Donald Trump. Is that true? And did you do it?
Somewhat, yeah. I think, you know, I don't know how I didn't get it directly from him. I got it, you know, from someone who's an acquaintance of his who said, you know, he'd like to do that or whatever. And no, I did not. I didn't. That's not something that really interests me. You know, I do have a friend who did golf with him, you know, and he told me some crazy stories about genuine cheating. Like, you know, I saw you tweet about his golf score and beating the club record. Well, what people don't realize is when he hits a 200-yard drive, he has people in the fairway that kick it an extra 40, 50 yards. Then on top of that, underneath the ball, wherever it's laying, there's a tee. Okay. So if he's in the rough, and I'll tell you the story my friend told is, this is how he knew. He hit a ball and my buddy hit it right, you know? So he's looking for his ball to the right, but he saw Trump hit his further right than his. And then Josh can't find his ball, but it's in the middle of the fairway all of a sudden. He's like, wait a minute, I hit it way right. And then he sees Trump's ball is like to the right of his, and he looks at the ball, he sees a T under it, and he sees this, the secret agent there, and he's like, oh my God, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, because it's just been revealed. But yeah, I don't think that those scores, they're very Kim Jong-un-ish, like where he shot 18 on a par, 72. It's kind of inflated. Yeah.
So ridiculous.
And
Daniel,
himself, like if he has like a 20-foot putt, sometimes he'll just pick it up. Like, yeah, right.
He's got a disgusting golf swing too. But he winning the club championship, Daniel, is like Vladimir Putin scoring 8 goals the other day. Did you see that?
Like recently Putin was doing sort of this karate expose, this judo expose. And you know what? He was just happened to beat these 25-year-old men in perfect shape. It happens,
Like I would have taken the opportunity. Not many people get the opportunity to play golf with the president. I would have been like, and that would have probably been your last hole. I wouldn't have been disrespectful, but I would have said, Mr. President, why are you teeing up your golf ball? Mr. President, do you always do this on the golf course? Like, I wonder what he would say to that. Because what's the point?
Might not like that because you're busting. You're
I mean, I am, but he has 2 choices. He could either not answer and tell the Secret Service to get you off the course, then you have a story, or he can give you an answer and you put him in a peculiar situation. How do you think he would answer that?
I would, if it were me, I would probably giggle and sort of come from like a laughing place of like, wait a minute, Donnie, like how the hell is there a T under your ball over here in the middle of the fairway? And I would do it from a disarming place rather than an antagonistic place. Because listen, you golf, you want to cheat, that's on you. I played with Mike Eruzione and Wayne Gretzky many years ago in a charity event, and Mike Eruzione was cheating on the back. I'm not down with that. I don't want to do that, but I don't know. People live by different moral codes when it comes to sport. And,
Daniel, call me crazy. I think the way you act and behave on the golf course is the way sometimes you act in life. I think if you cheat on the golf course, you cheat in life. I think if you're honorable on the golf course and you put everything out, then that's probably the way you conduct business and live your life. That's just my personal opinion.
There's no way that that's incorrect. I mean, bottom line is if you lack integrity in certain areas, it's almost impossible that you're like, oh, no, I cheated that stuff, but I'm totally honest about this stuff. You lose all credibility, and that matters to me too, obviously.
I'll admit it. Sometimes when I'm having a bad day, I'll throw my golf clubs. Okay. Sometimes I have a temper.
Well, that's in line with you because that's you. Sometimes you freak out on people and you go, you moron, idiot, da, 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 da. That's you throwing a golf club.
You should see me at the poker table. I'm worse than Phil Hellmuth, but we can talk about that another time, Daniel. Before I let you go, and I really do appreciate your time. I love talking to you, Daniel. Promote your podcast. I think it's great. You're helping out a lot of people. We have a lot of listeners here. You're helping out a lot of people with your podcast, those that are struggling with mental illness, and just to promote that and tell me how people can follow that and watch that.
Yeah, sure. Well, the Mania podcast is on my YouTube channel. It's also on Spotify and other things like that. And just to sort of give a better description of the pod, because we do talk about mental health, because my wife, she is bipolar. And she's very open and vulnerable. She also has a psychology degree, but that's not all the podcast is. It's really about our relationship. It's almost like you get a little glimpse into a 1-hour therapy session where we talk about how we deal with these, sort of issues, but we also talk about real life issues. One thing near and dear to her heart is the homelessness crisis, so that'll come up, and whatever's going on in the world. Again, we, for the most part, steer clear of, politics, but obviously, when we're talking about the homeless situation, that's part and parcel. So we cover the gamut. We have a lot of fun with it. It's a personal, I think a lot of people who are in relationships can vibe with sort of the antics we have, because she's pretty quick on her feet, and so she gives it back. One of the things I love about my wife is that she's an equal. I really believe that. Like I had my agent say, when we did the podcast, he's like, she's just as good as you. You guys are a great team together. And I think for us, we really do this. We do this because we love it. And if people love it, great. We don't make content for numbers, for clicks, for all that stuff. We just do this stuff because we really, really enjoy the creative process.
I think that's very admirable, and you're helping a lot of people. Boy, do I need a 1-hour session. Let me know when I could enter that realm. God, you guys could dissect a lot for me. But
you were really good on this podcast. You didn't say moron, imbecile, or idiot once.
I have never called you a name.
Not me.
We don't. Well, I will when I take calls in about 5 minutes.
Trust me. You will. I know you will. Know.
But you're extremely intelligent, and I love the fact that we can talk about anything. It doesn't always have to be poker, and I always appreciate your perspective. Even though we might disagree on some things, I always appreciate it. And we got to get on the links one of these days, Daniel, and I'll try not to throw any golf clubs, okay?
I'll bring you out to Lake Las Vegas. It's a nice course out here, South Shore.
I would love to do that one day. Daniel, you're the best, my friend. I appreciate the time as always, and keep up the great work with your podcast because you guys are helping out a lot of people.
Appreciate it, man. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Daniel. There you go, everybody. I grew up watching him play poker. I mean, he's one of the best poker players in the world. He's modest, but he is. I would say he's probably a top 5 player in the world for the last, 25 years. Great poker player. The guy's made, I don't even want to estimate how much money he's made playing poker, but it's astronomical. Smart guy. Don't agree with him on everything, but very intelligent. And Danny Negreanu is a good dude.